Game jams are one of the best ways to create games in very short time and practice working under pressure, while also gaining experience for developing future projects. 3 years ago, we decided to jump into game jam ourselves, and for us, as a team, it was something new because we had never worked together on game jam before. Before that, we only worked on projects that we planned for a long time before starting. A game jam is usually about coming up with a game idea in a short amount of time, creating a playable version, and correctly implementing the themes so your project stands out or gets as many points as possible. Of course, every game jam is different, but we chose the PPIT game jam, which lasted a full month, meaning 30 days. So it felt like enough time to come with a solid idea and actually make the game. And it worked because this project didn't end with just game jam. Even before it started, we were nervous if we could do it and if we would fail, but we agreed that the main goal was just to submit something. On November 1st, 2022, the team was announced and it was out of money. Along with the team, special challenges were announced as well, which were not mandatory, but it was good to complete some of them. Everyone from the team started throwing out ideas, and that's when the brainstorming phase began. The first idea was that the main character lives in the mountains, in the countryside, it's autumn and the trees have nice colors. Out of nowhere, the main character suddenly decides to go to the city for some reason, but runs out of money for the train back. Because of that, the character starts the journey back home to the mountains. The game would be strongly inspired by jumping, but without targeting extreme difficulty. The goal would be to climb from the bottom all the way to the top, from the city back to the countryside in the mountains. Another idea was to make 2D platformer where the player searches for treasures and artifacts, basically items that can be sold to earn money. But every time the player moves, the money keeps dropping and slowly runs out. The goal would be to survive for as long as possible, and the game would end once the money reaches 0, meaning you run out of money. After throwing out ideas, we entered the rest phase, where everyone on the team took a 1-day break to clear their thoughts. We felt it was a good idea to let everything sit for a bit and focus on something else. That way we could come up with new and better ideas, or just confirm that the ideas we already had were good and actually doable. If you are planning to join a game jam as well and you have more time than just 3 days, definitely take at least few hours off. Before starting, it can help you avoid making a game that isn't well planned. After the break, we decided to go with one of the ideas, the second one, and slightly change it, which you'll see later in the video. Then we move into the prototyping phase, building the basic mechanics with placeholder graphics. While I was working on these basic mechanics, the artist and designer were working on visuals and lore of the game. The first thing I prototyped was the player, more specifically the player movement. Since we already had several projects behind us, it wasn't hard to have the first prototype ready on the first day. The bigger challenge was polishing the prototype to get better results, which took several more days. We had to figure out what worked, what didn't, look up tutorials, watch YouTube videos or just Google stuff. Once the player prototype was ready, the artist could work on the character itself, like animation and similar things. As a programmer, I move on from the player to the world generation. Maybe you ask, why world generation instead of static world? The simple answer is that we didn't have much time, but we also wanted to try something new. Since none of our previous projects used generated worlds, these projects only had static levels where everything was fixed and predefined. And on top of that, process generation gives the player a better experience because every run feels different. While working on world generation, I ran into several problems because our vision was to make the world infinite, meaning the player should never reach the edge of the map, and I managed to get this working practically, meaning you can sometimes find a dead end, but that doesn't mean you reach the edge of the world. The generation itself was pretty simple. Imagine a 2D grid where each tile is a single island. We then have a list of islands, and each island defines where its entrances and exits are, since you can move through them in the both directions. At the beginning we had to start on single island that had exits in all directions, and from there the algorithm could run. The algorithm works by adding an island on each side, but the island selection isn't completely random. First it checks which island types can fit based on the open exits of the current island and the islands generated nearby. Then it selects an island that has the correct reverse exit, and it can also have other exits. The main thing is that the connection works. This keeps repeating based on the player render distance, so the work is generated dynamically, and when the player moves, new islands are generated immediately. This also helps with optimization, and of course, this isn't the only optimization. We also use asynchronous calls so the game doesn't freeze and generation runs in the background without a big performance hit. And that was it. The prototype, maybe even the final version of work generation, was ready. Or at least that's what I thought. Then came the task of collecting islands with bridges and ladders so you could move between them easily, and working on these mechanics was hell. Not the ladder climbing itself, the part was fine, we solved that with automatic climbing, but the real problem was visual. How do you make a bridge with the right length, the right angle, and still make it look good? Can you think of a solution? Because at the moment I didn't. After hours, maybe even days of browsing the internet and trying to find some advice that would point me in the right direction, I found one interesting mathematical thing that I had read about before but never thought could be used here. Can you guess what it was? Yes, it was a spline. A spline turned out to be exactly what I needed, and you might be thinking this still doesn't solve the visuals. But actually I combined it with shaders, and just like that the solution was found. Basically, I use a spline to get the points placed at the open exits from the island and then finding the next point that should connect to. After that, it was easy to control how much the bridge bends or stretches and how the texture is scaled. I used the same system for ladders, but those were much simpler. Because instead of bending, I wanted them to be perfectly straight, just vertical. While I was working on this solution, the artist and the designer created the basic character, with our final animation for now, and quickly made the island, since the deadline was getting closer. The last week was very intense. It felt like we were only halfway done and the UI hadn't been touched yet. So I jumped straight into the UI, the pause menu, the main menu, and basic settings like volume and graphics. Then I moved straight to the inventory, since the goal of the game was to find artifacts in chests and sell them, so collected items had to shown somewhere. The main mechanic for items was that every item gives both positive and negative bonuses, like adding or removing inventory slots, changing speed, gravity, or selling price in the shop, and so on. Another mechanic I added was opening a chest and instantly getting an item that could be picked up into the inventory. Honestly, I won't explain the inventory in detail, but in short, it had a limited number of slots, which could be expanded using positive bonuses from items you carry. On the map, you could sometimes find a shop where items could be sold, but the player could also keep them if they wanted the bonuses. If a shop couldn't be found for a long time, the player could use portals which spawn more often and teleport you directly to a shop. But there is also a chance to find a shop that buys items for very bad prices. We also added a visual effect using particle system for money falling when the player moves or even stands still, and if the player falls from a high, a larger amount of money is removed at once, which is also shown visually. The game is all about speed. The player can't get stuck for too long because chests don't respawn and some areas might not have enough items to sell, which makes it even harder. On top of that, we added several extra mechanics, including a map. The map on the rivals islands the player has already visited and shows what can be found on them. It generated automatically alongside the world, creating paths and points of interest as the island spawned. We also implemented a leaderboard connecting via API to Lotlogger, letting players compete and compare their runs. While I worked on these features, the rest of the team focused on the UI, buttons, inventory and menu design. They also balanced the economy and the spawn rates of different objects like chests, shops, portals and similar things. At the same time, they took settings such as render distance, movement speed, and jump height, basically things that were already implemented but needed proper values to feel good. At the last moment, about 2 days before the deadline, we wanted to expand the movement, so we added fans and trampolines, where the fans lifted the player into the air, and trampolines to launch the player higher. To make sure we didn't forget about bonus points in the game jam, we also did Halloween themed visuals like pumpkins that break when the player steps on them, and spawn candy that instantly adds money, or burning candles that go out when the player walks past them. These kinds of details are what make games feel more polished and unique, and they are also more memorable for players, while making the world feel less empty than before. In the end, we also added sound effects and music, either from paid packs or free-to-use sources. And that was it. The game was finished. Of course, we still did some final testing and polishing to make sure the game was playable and didn't contain many major bugs. After final check, we uploaded and submitted. We even managed to do it in an hour before the deadline. And honestly, it felt amazing. A whole month of hard work, chaos, stress and fun was finally behind us. After 2 days of non-stop work, we could finally go to sleep. And honestly, it was worth it. We learned a lot of new things and gaining valuable experience that we won't just forget. At the time of submission, we had no idea that we would return to this game one day, just under the different name. But that story for another time. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching until the end. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think about this new video style and what you'd like to see next, whether it's deeper breakdown of specific feature or something completely different. See you soon.